You have now arrived at your destination.
Kipp, this is such a joy for me to do. I've heard so many good things from Danny at Sequoia, obviously from Kieran on your team, so huge thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Harry. Pumped to be here, man.
It is going to be a great show, but I want to start with a little bit on you. I love a bit of context setting, so tell me, how did you make your way into the world of startups? And then how did you come to really lead one of the most powerful marketing and growth orgs in HubSpot today?
Look, I wish I had some master plan. I didn't. I'm somebody who's just a really, really curious and obsessive person. I love to learn. And in the early 2000s, I saw the internet happening, and I was doing marketing at a bunch of different marketing agencies. And I was like, wow, this internet is going to change how people do marketing. And I didn't know what I was doing, but I realized one really important thing, that when something's new, everybody has the same baseline of knowledge, right? It's not like somebody's been doing it for 30 years and has some advantage. I was like, great. So all I have to do is learn faster than everybody else, and I can be successful. And so that's all I did is I read, I networked, I went to events, I did a blog. I had a blog called Social Media B2B, which was all about just like how social and the web were going to impact B2B, boring kind of traditional companies. Nobody was talking about that then, right? They were all talking about the consumer stuff. And all of that work, I'd kind of wake up at 5 a.m. and grind out some blog posts and then go to work and then kind of do that every day, led me to meet Brian Dermesh at HubSpot, which was amazing, and they were like, hey, well, why don't you come help us? And I met them, and I was like, oh, they believe the same thing I believe in the world. Man, that's, for people listening, that's a very rare moment. When you meet people who believe the very same thing you believe, and the majority of humanity does not yet believe that thing. You got to remember, this is like late 2000s when online marketing was still really early. You're talking like 13 years ago. And a lot of people were still very into print and out of home and all of those old school things. And so I met Brian and Dermesh, and then the rest was kind of history from there.
Can I ask, when do you think the tide turned and the realization for everyone else became very apparent that what you were doing was right?
I'd say about 2014-ish, 2013 to 2014. Basically what happened, Harry, is that Facebook ads especially got real in that world, and basically Google, Facebook, all of those ad products got way mature, and then we got good enough at like organic search, for example, that like, oh, you could build a real business. And like Kieran and I were doing it at HubSpot, right? And people were looking up and being like, oh, how do these guys have millions of people interested in this boring quote unquote B2B software company? And I think between that, the inbound marketing book, everything of that movement, it took a while, but then that's when it really started, I think, happening for real.
Do you know what I love about the show is that I just completely fucking freewheel, Kipp. I have this schedule and then I just ignore it.
I love it. You know me. I don't need a schedule, dude.
So the biggest problem that I have often, and I advise founders with it today, is actually that, one, you don't need to be on every channel. When people are on every channel, they do it poorly. But if you do, channels are so individual and specialist. To win on YouTube is very different to winning on LinkedIn or Twitter.
Yes.
You need teams per channel. Do you agree with me? And how do you think about channel selection, prioritization, resource allocation? Love to hear how you think about that.
Oh yeah, you're speaking my language. It's a hard problem, right? Because founders want to do everything, and they also want to track everything. And so first challenge here is tracking is getting harder every day. Data privacy is making tracking attribution ROI much harder every day. And I think if you're a founder out there, you're going to do some type of advertising that works well for you. It might be Google, might be Facebook, might be YouTube. You're going to have some primary advertising channel, and you're going to need 1 to 2 primary organic channels. And I think it depends on your scale and your competition. Like if I was doing a 2x2 to answer your question, I would say, do I need a few people every month, or do I need hundreds of thousands of people every month? And do I have no competition, or do I have a lot of competition, right? And so depending on which quadrant you fall in, I think depends what channel you would actually pick. So if you are going, I have a lot of competition and I need a lot of people, then you're probably doing YouTube, right? Because classic Google search is the first place everybody goes. And so if you have less competition, then go to Google search. Text is easier, right? And the conversion rates are a little higher. If you're just entering a very entrenched space where there's people who've been doing really good content inbound marketing for a while, then you need to be different. And you've got to maybe go someplace like YouTube, for example, to get real scale. And if you don't need that many people, that's where you go into different types of influence campaigns, LinkedIn, different things if you're kind of in a niche B2B business. But if you're talking about real scale, which I imagine a lot of folks listening are, it's about which Google property you're going to start with, I think for me.
I think the hard thing also, so I'm totally with you there, and I agree. The hard thing is, though, with content, I think everyone fails because for me, it's a game of who can survive the longest. I've been doing this for 7, 8 years. Yes, we have hundreds of thousands of listeners, but it's 7, 8 years every weekend.
The grind.
But sometimes it still doesn't work. And so my question to you is like, how do you know when to give up on a new channel versus when to just keep persisting and the tide will turn?
Oh, that's a great question. And so when I think about enduring on a new channel, I think about like my moral imperatives. Like, do I have another choice? Sometimes you don't have another choice. Sometimes you're like, cool, if I can't make Google search work, then this business is just not going to work. I'm not going to be able to acquire customers at a low enough cost to make this business work, for example. And so if that's the case, then you got to grind it out. If that's not the case, I look at it as like, are you able to make real predictable growth progress? Are you able to increase your subscribers and your distribution on that channel? Even if it's small, but are the growth rates meaningful? Can you grow that thing, 4, 5, 6%, 7, 8, 9, 10% month over month? Even if the numbers are small, well, it's like, oh, I'm figuring this out. And can you point to clear things that you have learned that are driving that growth? If you have, then grind it out. If you don't know what the hell you're doing and you're flat performance and you're just kind of like throwing stuff at the wall, then it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're not going to be successful. What you have to understand is you have to think like a creator. You have to have a creator, either be one yourself or have one on your team, who understands that it's a mix of like the best ideas and the best content, but packaged perfectly for that platform.
I'm so glad you said about think like a creator there, because the thing that bluntly irritates me the most, I'm really just sounding off today, irritates me the most is founders, and I say, hey, you've got an incredible opportunity, Kipp, to build a brand in this space, in this geo, in this specific, and they go, oh, no, I'm content's not my thing. I'm not into personal brand. And I'm like, fuck, no one goes to the gym and is like, I feel at home. This is so me. No, it takes time. It's a muscle. You keep working it. Do you agree? And how do you advise founders today on building that personal brand?
Here's what you have to know. I'm a first principles driven person. I'm just logical to a fault, for better or for worse. And so every company in the world is either distribution constrained or product constrained. Right? They don't have a product that's good enough to sell to their customers for the price that they want to sell it for. Or they do, and they can't get that product out in front of customers for a low enough cost. Right? And normally what happens when you're early on in a business, those two things are kind of like S-curves. And the product S-curve is always the first, right? You're trying to find product market fit. You kind of get middle of the way up that curve, and you kind of found it. And that's awesome. And then you start that second S-curve, which is the distribution one. And most companies fail not because of the product curve, but because of the distribution curve. Mm-hmm. And so you could not want to do content, what have you. You have to solve distribution. So what I would say to them is, cool, you don't want to be a creator, you don't care about personal brand, great. How are we going to get scalable distribution at a low cost? The content's one way, but if you tell me you have an awesome viral loop, cool, then I don't give a shit if you care about content. You can make it work. If you have some repeatable template growth strategy that allows you to grow through like basically search, template, product action, great. Then you don't have to go and have this personal brand. But if you don't have an answer to that distribution strategy, then you have to care about content and personal brand, because that by default is your distribution strategy. And you are going to be distribution constrained more than you are going to be product constrained unless you are just completely inept at building the thing you're building.
Mm-hmm. Listen, I totally agree with you there in terms of what's the distribution plan. If you don't have one, then you have to care. I think one thing I also find interesting is founders who try and get too cute on channels. You mentioned kind of the mix between organic and paid.
Yeah.
And I find too many too early are like, no, I need diversification of channel. And I'm like, no, you don't. It's working on Facebook. It's working on paid. Just keep going. It's rare to have it working. How do you think about the diversification of channel? And then also how to transition between channel when you maybe see a denigration of effectiveness?
If you are good at what you do in distributing things on the internet, every channel of any scale that I know of, you have years and years of runway.
Huh.
You know, I'll tell you this, Harry. My first job at HubSpot is I wrote the HubSpot blog. I think we did like 3 posts a day for, a year or whatever. And we did that to get organic search traffic. We're still doing that. We are 15 years into that blog grind, and it's still working. We're still growing that traffic. Yeah, we've expanded topics. Yes, we're optimizing the old stuff, all of that. But think about that. Like, I made that work for over a decade and a half. If you're thinking you're going to run out of runway in 12 months, you're just kind of an idiot. Like, you're not thinking about the real potential of what you have. Humanity's natural proclivity is to go do a new thing, because they're bored of the old thing. The most successful people say, wait, I have this thing that's working really well. How do I make it better and better every day? And how do I be a top 1% person in the world at this thing? Like, if you look, you're a really smart, savvy investor, right? You've seen all kinds of companies at all kinds of stages. Mm-hmm. I think you're going to agree that the following's true. A startup that gets traction and really kicks off, they've got one predictable growth channel. It's often ads, right? Mm-hmm. A startup that really scales and gets and like flirts with that $50, $100 million run rate, they have 2 predictable growth channels. Normally it's ads plus one other thing, whether it be YouTube, whether it be Google search, whether it be some type of free product, virality, whatever. The company that scales, goes public, really kind of has a future to be a big scale company, really only has 3 scale distribution channels. They don't have 10. They got 3. And so if you're a founder and you're in that first bucket, your job's just to get to 1 and have that 1 keep working for you. And then as you scale, you're going to need to add 1 more, not 5 more, 1 more. People think that they need to do way more than they actually need to.
Okay, so my question, I totally agree with you, and I love that breakdown. My question, gosh, I wish we were having a martini, and
I would love that. You're in London, which is my favorite city, not just in the world, but my favorite city to have a martini. So please
come. We could do a much more atmospheric conversation. But I want to ask you. You mentioned the kind of the expansion from 1 to 2 to 3. In terms of testing that next kind of jump and transition to the second. Do you, in terms of resource allocation, do you recommend kind of splitting across 5 different potential channels, or really going in hard to test 1? Do you dedicate budget to YouTube to really give it a go, or sprinkle across 5 and see what hits?
I'm a fan, Harry, of a more focused approach. I think of marketing as a venture capitalist, whether you're a big established venture capitalist like Sequoia, an angel investor, anywhere in between. Your job is to make really smart decisions and win on a bunch of asymmetric returns. And so it's actually like, how many channels do I think I actually have the chance for an asymmetric return on? It's actually not that many. Yeah. And most of the time when people spread themselves thin across 5, 6 different things, it's because they don't realize that. Once you're very clear on the asymmetry of the return, you can say, there's actually only like 2 things that are going to give me the return I want, and I should just go as aggressive as possible of those 2 things, and I have to make one of them work. If I make both of them work, then I'm a legend, and then we have scaled this thing beyond what anybody thought was possible. If I make one of them work, we're going to survive, we're going to be great, we're going to be successful.
Can I ask, can you take me to a time when you thought one was working, doubled down on it, and it didn't work?
So in the early days of HubSpot, we had a free tool called Website Grader. You put your website in, and it returned a report. Awesome. People were sharing it on social, like really grew, big part of how we kind of generated leads, emails for automation, all of that kind of stuff. Still do, but man, it had a peak and then really troughed down. And I think we actually made a bigger mistake than the one you're asking, which was we spent a bunch of time trying to redo it, do the product, redo Website Grader to reaccelerate that growth. And we didn't realize that actually it had a point in time, and then it has a new steady state after that initial like point in time where websites really got mitigated through the diversification of the web, the rise of different social channels, people consuming across different media types. Websites are still important, but they weren't like the thing like they were in the late 2000s, early 2000 teens, you know? And so I think the mistake that we made there is thinking, oh, you can salvage that and get back to that peak. You know, we spent a while, like a couple of years trying to do that. And I think we would have been much, much better off, for example, if I had a time machine, I would have said, no. Our job is to like get the best steady run rate, and we should go and conquer a new channel with that same time, energy, and capital.
Totally agree with you. One thing that really... This should be called What Pisses Harry Off.
Please, I love this. Let's go.
Product marketing. I really find that...
I hate product marketing in so many ways. I have a love-hate relationship with product marketing.
I don't think people can tell stories. And I always say to founders when I meet them, I'm an investor, I meet 25 founders a week. I say, if you had a billboard on Times Square, what would you put on it in 10 words or less? The amount of founders that can coherently say an answer, I'd say 10%, if that, 5% that are actually good. I find that appalling. I'm intrigued. Do you agree with me on the state of product marketing today? And how do you think about the most effective product marketing?
Yeah, I'll give you my rant on product marketing. Harry just gave us his rant. I'm going to give you mine. Well, most founders are inherently logical humans, and they're often very product-driven humans, right? So you know what they do? They go hire product marketing as one of the first functions they want to hire. And you're like, oh, this sounds great. You're going to help me tell a story around the product. That's never what happens. What happens is those people become operators and like basically project story pushers around. You know, it's like, oh, I'm going to run to this product leader, to this business leader, and it becomes basically internal gymnastics versus external storytelling. And they pull these product marketers so close to them that their product marketers are too close to the founder and not close enough to the customer. And when the product marketers do get closer to the customer, the companies often don't make the hard choice of saying, this is what my customer wants, but it's not what we're going to give them because they need something they do not yet know that they want. And I need to package a different story for them. I think the best companies that have the best story don't start with product marketing. They start with the problem that their customer has. So if we take the HubSpot story, for example, we didn't start with, hey, you need software to do better marketing or anything like that. We said, hey, technology's changed the way people shop and buy. And because technology's come along, they're like, they're fast forwarding through your commercials. They're throwing out the yellow pages because they got Google. They don't need your direct mail. They got ads on the internet. All of these things, like, what are you doing? Don't you need to do marketing in a fundamentally better way? Yeah, actually I do. What do? Oh, it's called inbound marketing. It's amazing. You're going to create content. You're going to deliver that content through free organic channels. You're going to grow over time. You're going to own those assets versus renting them from somebody else. It's going to be amazing. And then by that time, people are like, oh, well, cool. How do I do that? I'm like, oh, well, we have some software for you. It's called HubSpot. You should check it out. We can help you do all those things way better, provide amazing automation for you. But that product story is that part of the act. You know, if people are coming to you and saying like, oh, I need this particular product, I need this category, then you're in a market share game with all of your competitors. If you are defining that category and defining the human changes within that category, then you're growing that category, and you're then not against your competitors, you are against your ability to grow that category and drive awareness for it.
So, I mean, I have a couple of things I have to unpack there. I totally agree with you on defining the category. Does that not also make it almost harder because you're then entering a customer education process?
Yeah, for sure.
And that's more expensive, no?
It's not necessarily more expensive, but it takes longer. You know, when you are in the category creation mode, you know, there's two types of business. You're creating categories, you're a transformative business, or you're a better mousetrap business, right? And most better mousetrap businesses are 10x better, 10x cheaper, 10x faster, whatever. And transformation is like, we're going to ask you to do something completely new, right? We're going to ask you to leave the old way of thinking behind and think this new way. And it takes longer because you start earlier on that adoption bell curve. You start with those early adopters and then go up. When you're a better mousetrap, you start in the middle of the bell curve. You're like, oh, I know about this category. It's awesome. Let me tell you how my thing is better. The problem is when you start at the beginning of the bell curve, you can be really different. When you start in the middle, you're kind of just like everybody else. And so you have, if you're running a better mousetrap business, you have to be obsessed with differentiation and emotion. I think that's where brand marketing is way more important than product marketing. Yes, you can describe the value proposition of your product, but what is the reason that somebody should believe in your brand, have emotion about this thing that they already know, that there's already a bunch of good things out in the world to do and solve? Like, why should they take the time to switch or consider your new thing?
Can I ask, brand marketing wise, to be very clear, how do you define brand marketing, one? And then what do you think you've done so well that means thousands of people want to come to your conferences? People don't want to fucking go to conferences. Thousands want to go to yours. What have you done well brand marketing wise to inspire that feeling within customers?
So when I think about brand, Harry, I think it is the emotional benefit of not just your product, your service, but your company. Like, why do you exist in the world? And what do you make people feel? You know, and from the very beginning at HubSpot, our goal was we want people to feel like we are there to help them, teach them, like guide them through this transformation. And so that just became the principle. And so in the early days, you know, I talk to startups all the time, and they're like, look, I don't have a bunch of money for this expensive brand marketing. I'm like, cool, yeah. No, we didn't either. Tell you what we did. We had a good story that resonated with people. We wrote a book, we spoke at conferences, we wrote a blog. All that stuff was actually pretty cheap. The hard part, the expensive part, was getting the story and agreeing that that story was the right story to tell and having it really tight and everything. And so that whole message just kind of cascaded through, and that becomes a movement, that becomes an emotion. And so people want to come to our event. Most conferences are marketed as like, oh, it's going to be great networking. You're going to get to learn from your peers, right? And I think that's like, if you think about most big conferences, like that's what it is. People come to our event, like we're having our event Inbound in September this year, and we'll have, I don't even know how many people, thousands of people there, because they know that all we want is to help and educate them. That's it. Like that, they know that if they sit down in a room that they are going to get a completely valuable and different perspective on whatever topic they're sitting down in. And I've read all the NPS reports, Harry. I have read all the surveys. The top rated thing, the top reason people come is the quality of content, the quality of education. Same reason people listen to your show all the time, because that's what they want, because that is the scarce thing in this world today. Everybody's trying to just cold sell and cold email people to all hell. It's very rare to get that value today.
What do you think is the biggest mistake that founders and startups you see make when it comes to brand marketing?
Not giving a shit about it. Right?
And you think that's just because it's not inherent within founders, or it's not taught? Like, I almost sympathize with them. It's like product marketing, brand marketing for a technical founder who then also doesn't know sales as well. It's fucking hard.
It's super hard, right? This what you are getting at is why all like the majority of startups fail, right? Because all of these things are very different disciplines, and it is a rare human being who can figure out how to prioritize and get them all right.
Does your brand marketing change significantly over time? And do you worry about inconsistencies there? Like when you think about, HubSpot's evolving product layering on CRMs, etc. Does the brand marketing change over time? And how do you think about not losing your core when expanding the brand marketing to additional?
Yeah, let me give the founders out there listening, I think, a framework that will help them kind of codify this a little bit. You want to think about your marketing story as in a timeline. Right? And so the brand marketing work that you do is the longest part of your timeline. That's going to be 12 to 18 months ahead of the reality of your business and your product. It's the emotional benefit. It's pointing everybody to where you're going. Okay? Then the product marketing that you're doing, that's going to be basically, that's kind of like 90 days, 4 months ahead of where you are right now. You're previewing, you're giving some roadmap, but like it's largely in the here and now. Your demand generation is exactly in the here and now. It is what is happening right now. It's what you have to offer people, and it's what customers want in the market today. And like, if you think about stacking those three things along that timeline, it gets a lot clearer. Because you basically start at the demand generation stuff and say, oh, what's my story here today? Do I got it working? And are people buying it? Great. You extend a little bit to product marketing. They say, great. Now I can accelerate that demand generation, that product marketing, if I tell a remarkable brand story that shows people that my company in this business is going in a real long-term direction that is better and different than the other alternatives in this market.
I totally get you there. It all to me comes back to like resonance with your customer. The challenge and the question I have for you is HubSpot is bought by a huge variety of customers, incredibly horizontal product. How do you think about resonance when it's anyone from a gardening company to a dentist to a mum and pop cookie store? When it's such a horizontal product, how do you think about that brand marketing story resonating across the horizontal customer base?
All those people have the same problems. All of those people have the same problems. You have to find the best stories are when you can find the universal truths across your customer base that people are afraid to say out loud, but they believe, and tell them to them, right? Like that's what we did with inbound marketing. It's like, people knew that they were sending out 10,000 direct mail, cards at work and then going home and throwing everything in their mailbox away. They knew that, but they didn't want to admit that to themselves, right? They needed somebody to tell them, and not just tell them in a shameful way, but tell them in a, hey, it's okay. There's a better way. And that is the universal truth here that I think every business has to get to is, we have this big, diverse group of customers. Yeah, we do. But they're all trying to grow. They're all trying to to solve a crisis of disconnection with their own customers, right? They feel like they're a mile away from their own customers, whether that be attracting them in, keeping and retaining them. And so I don't care if you're an architect, a manufacturing company, a software company. If I can talk to you in that way and give you real practical ways to do that on top of that emotional benefit of doing that, then that doesn't matter. You can have a big, clear, horizontal business with that.
Can I ask, when we look at the things that we've mentioned, brand marketing, product marketing, taking unconventional bets on new channels, one thing that strikes me is actually the challenge for, say, a CMO in communicating why we need that budget to the board, to the CEO. Mm-hmm. How do you advise CMOs on managing up in order to get their upward hierarchy to see what they see and what they need?
Look, it's a tough thing. I would say there's also a converse to what you just talked to, Harry. It's like you manage up to that budget, and then your CEO and your board are often trying to push down and spread you in a bunch of directions too, right? They're trying to cause you to be less focused. So there's this double-edged problem that like both are bad for the marketing leader, right? And so what you have to do, I want to help people out there solve both of those. On the CEO, the board pushing at it and try to like extend your priorities, what you have to do is be very proactive versus reactive. You have to play offense instead of defense. And you have to say, hey, I'm looking at the state of our business. Here are the 3 to 4 key strategies and things we must nail for the next 6 to 12 months. And you take it and you shop it around. You go to the board meeting. You get everybody bought in. And then anytime somebody asks you to do that, you say something new. You're like, oh, well, that's not part of the things we agreed on. We'll add that in. And we'll revisit it in 6 months when we talk about it again. And yes, they're going to push, and yes, you might have to do some of it, but man, it will deflect a lot, and will make your life a lot easier. But then you brought up the point of like, how do you manage up? How do you get the resources to actually be successful? Well, first you anchor it all in what are the business goals? Like, what is the constraint for growth of that business? Because once a board and a CEO is always thinking about like, what is the thing that if we fixed, would drive growth and success for this business. And you as a marketer have to tell them, this is how marketing can solve that problem. So that might be deal creation, that might be your competitive win rates, that could be a whole host of different business metrics, could be customer retention, whatever that may be. And then you package a strategy that solves just like that. You say, hey, I can help us create more deals. This is what it's going to take. It's going to take a content marketing strategy. It's going to take a prospecting strategy. This is what it's going to take. This is the amount of humans and money it's going to cost to do it. Do you want to solve this problem with me or not? And at that point, it's very clear. Either they're going to give you the money to solve that problem, or they don't care about that problem in the way you thought. And then so if you're not solving it, they shouldn't be upset or think you're not doing your job for not solving it because you brought it to their attention.
And be happy with the silence. I find that everyone says, like, hey, do you want to do it or not? Let it sit. Don't say anything else. Like, just leave it there. But
there's nothing better in the world than a binary.
Totally.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
100%. The element that's interesting and slightly nuanced, though, is the element of accountability and attribution. And it's, should marketing be held accountable to a number tied directly to revenue? Leads alone ain't worth much, actually, if they don't convert.
Of course.
So how do you think about creating frameworks of accountability and attribution around the initiatives that marketing does to prove the effectiveness?
Yeah. So look, you're talking about a problem of attribution, which has always been a problem as long as marketing exists, will always be a problem as long as marketing exists. And it kind of ebbs and flows. And like, honestly, it's going to get kind of worse in the short term because data from Google and Facebook and other channels is getting worse, not better. For example, email data getting worse, not better. And so what you have to do is measuring something is more of an internal alignment exercise than it is an analytic exercise. You have to understand on the puts and takes of between marketing, sales, CFO, CEO, what do we agree on? So for example, Harry, there's overlap across marketing and sales and across marketing channels. So how are you going to account for overlap? Like in your attribution is like a big thing that you have to figure out. And there's endless ways that you could rationalize to do it right. So it matters less what you decide and matters more that the business agrees that, oh, this way we're doing it is good and fair to everyone and is an accurate representation of what we think is going to grow and scale this company, you know? And so when I think about it, I think every marketer in the future should be directly accountable to revenue, both inbound and outbound, whatever that may be for your business, you know, and in SaaS especially, right? Like it's pretty straightforward. You have a close rate, you have an average sale price of the product you sell. So you know, if you sell a $100 product and you have a 10% close rate on a qualified, we'll call it a qualified lead, then great. Every qualified lead's worth $10 because you need 10 of them to get to the 100. And yes, it's an oversimplification of the example, but you can get to what is a simple enough example that can show contribution in a way that's not perfect, but it's going to really work and drive alignment and growth for the business. Because that's ultimately what matters. Not marketing getting credit, but it's like, are we doing these activities and are we getting the growth that we want on the other side?
With the rise of product-led growth and the increasing importance of content marketing and consumers' appetite to engage with content marketing as a way to be educated on a product, to me, we're going to see like the complete delineation between sales and marketing where there's not really a blurring actually. I mean, there's not really like a line between the two. How do you think about that, given now consumers being so far along the sales funnel before they touch often a sales rep?
I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You're saying sales and marketing are going to become more different than they are similar, and that consumers are going to notice the starkness of that handoff more?
In a way that actually marketing is eating up so much more of the sales funnel with its education of customers where traditionally sales reps would have done. And actually the blurred lines are moving completely away and marketing is just kind of eating sales.
Well, look, marketing is eating sales, but I would actually say that like stories, differentiation, personalization are eating like go-to-markets, right? So it's like if you're a great marketer, right, and you've got content that resonates and you're using that to pull people in, drive automation, like really help them understand what you're all about, for example. Well, don't you think a sales rep's going to send a personalized video in their email about that same thing? It become like the best companies are going to figure out how to just have that content experience transition really seamlessly from one-to-many to one-to-one. That's all we're talking about. All we're talking about is one-to-many to one-to-one. That to me is the difference between marketing and sales. Is when you do something one-to-many, it's marketing. When you do something one-to-one, it's sales. And I fundamentally believe that's what's going to happen, is the best teams are going to be aligned on that story and that customer journey from that like very high-level brand awareness or first search result to the deck that a sales rep showed, the demo the sales rep show. And I want that line to be blurrier. The more stark the contrast is between marketing and sales, the less effective it's going to be in the future, because the customer is going to be like, oh, wait, I was sold on this thing, on this with all this marketing messages, but now I'm getting this very different vibe and experience and message over here. Is this really what I thought I was getting?
I totally get you, and I love that differentiation between one-to-one and one-to-many. I always think that actually lessons are learned in the mistakes that we make.
Of course.
Bunny, when we listen to you, it kind of sounds like you haven't made any, Kipp. And
I've made a shit ton.
I'm sure, respectfully. And so, like, when you review the mistakes you've made as a CMO with HubSpot, what was the most significant to you? And what would you say was the big lesson that you took away from it?
I will tell you what the most significant is. It's one of the things I talk with founders or companies I invest in constantly. And it's the mistake's always people related. People are much harder than strategy, turns out. Strategy is often much clearer. The people side of it, do you have the right people with the right skills for the right stage of your company, is actually the hard thing. The biggest mistakes I have made is not hiring the right person, or not knowing that I needed a person with a new level of skill set at that stage and scale of the company, or holding on to somebody who was really good for that last stage of growth, but isn't good for this next stage of growth too long, right? So, and being too close to that.
I heard that was a weakness of yours.
Totally.
Okay, but it's hard. What are the signals that someone is now in a stage where they are no longer comfortable or meant to be?
Well, so let me tell you why I think that's hard. Are you a sports fan, Harry? I think you are, right? Yeah.
Peloton all the way. Like.
Yeah, I love Peloton. But whether it be basketball, football, like, so for example, in the NFL and the NBA in the U.S., there are some teams that have a person who is both the coach and the general manager. And there are some teams that have a person whose job is to be general manager, another person's job is to be the coach. It's very hard to be both, right? And that's what you're asking a CMO to do, to be the coach and the general manager. And when you're the coach, you're so close to the people and you're in the trenches with the people that you have trust, you have loyalty, you have all those things. When you're a general manager, you're saying, I'm trying to win. Do I have what I need to win, right? And that is a very, very hard thing. That's a very hard thing for a CMO. It's a very hard thing for a founder. And so I have found that there are times where you have to purposely put on the general manager, fictitious hat. You got to say, okay, I have to take this week and think about it like I am just a general manager, change my schedule, and just be very, very objective. And you really have to put in processes in place where you're like, okay, I'm taking back and I'm taking a different look and evaluation at this team to make sure I have what is necessary to win.
I totally agree with you. But it's hard to do.
It's freaking so hard. And it's one of the things that, Harry, takes practice and repetition. You just can't hear me or you or anybody else in this world talk about it and be like, oh, cool, I got it. I'll just go and do it now.
So how do you actually do it? How do you form that detachment where you switch hats, put on the GM hat, and bluntly remove a bit of the humanity and go, this is not what we need?
You have to look at everything from the principle and problem layer, right? You actually have to take the people in totality out. And you have to say, okay, I am trying to grow. What are my constraints for growth? Based on those constraints for growth, what is it that I need to do? And what does success in doing those things look like? And you literally write it out. This is what I need to do. This is the type of skills and activities that will happen to be successful. Once you have all that finished, then you can go and overlay it on top of the people and be like, oh, great. Well, what we need to do is actually this person has the skills to do what we need to do, so that's fantastic. And we can go and march on to do it. Or actually this person doesn't, but I think I could coach them because it's just a small gap. Or, oh, actually there's a big gap, and what I need to do is bring in somebody with a different set of skills to help us get to that next stage of the problem.
I'm sure I use the show also as an advice. It's cheaper than a therapist or a mentor.
Of course, way cheaper.
Tell me, stretch candidates. Like, I am looking now, my media business has grown far faster than I thought.
Yeah, of course. Congrats.
But I need a CEO to really run the day-to-day processes. I have the feeling that I want someone young, hungry, who's not done it before, but is a complete fucking hustler. But then I'm also worried that actually I need a seasoned CEO who's run big media companies before. How do you think about the stretch VP versus the seasoned exec from a big firm?
Yeah, and I'll broaden this up to just founders overall, right? And if you're founder, I get this question all the time. Am I good with like a junior director of marketing for a while? Do I need a VP? Like, what do I need a CMO? What is it that I need, right? And what you have to say is, balanced teams win. Teams with a balance of perspective and skills win at the end of the day. And so if you're a CEO, for example, on the startup side, who's passionate about marketing, has been doing a lot of the company's marketing in the early days, well, then you know what's up. You can probably get by with a stretch candidate, right? Because you know a lot of it. If you are a super product-driven CEO and you are crushing on the product, but you don't know shit about marketing, then stretching is not going to be a good thing. So just on the media company side, Harry, if you are awesome at operations and you are process-driven, you know how to scale stuff, then you can go and stretch somebody. If you are not those things and you want to bring in somebody to be those things, then you need to have somebody with those skills more established.
Well, I didn't mean to dick you. I am awesome at them, but I also have about. I have 20. But I have 20 other things that I need to go do, and I can't be in them at all anymore. So it doesn't matter if I'm awesome or shit. I just can't do them anymore.
Well, no, it does. It does. I completely disagree with you. Because if you are awesome at them, you know how to help people. You know how to get people unstuck. You know how to push them and point them in the right direction. If you're not good at it, then you just don't have the clearest fucking idea what to do. And you don't know where to point somebody, and so they're just going to run around in a circle.
I totally agree with you. How do you know when to let someone go? I'm shit at letting someone go.
You know when to let someone go when it is clear that you're clear on what you're trying to achieve. You have told them what you were trying to achieve. Set expectations with them about what it takes to get there, and they have not been able to do it for a period of time that you guys agree on. Normally you would say, you can normally see progress pretty quick in a month or two. And like you can say, oh, this person's on the progressive path. They're going to get there. Or you can say, this person is actually just not. This is actually just a fundamentally wrong job for them. They actually care about this other thing that I don't need right now. And they should go to another organization and go do that and be great at it.
We spoke about the changing hats there and the challenge in moving to GM. I totally get you. And I spoke to Kieran on your team before this, and he said, I always wonder, is the role of CMO lonely? And I thought the same when he said it. Do you find the role of CMO lonely? And what's the most challenging aspect for you?
It's super lonely, right? Like, think about it. You have a pretty broad sense, and we get to the second part of your question, right, which is the challenging part. I don't know that there's another business discipline that requires as much context switching and broad knowledge than marketing. So, for example, what I mean by that is like you need to understand like the depths of like distribution on Google and Facebook. You got to understand email score deliverability and GDPR and data privacy regulations. But you need to understand what great design looks like and what a perfect event experience looks like. And, by the way, how to model and attribute all of that so that you can do what you need to do for your sales team. And then what's the story we're going to package for the product team, and how we're going to take that product to market? Once you start stacking all of the very different things that are actually fundamentally very different skills, it's a very broad job, and that's what makes it lonely. Because at any month, you're kind of focused on one part of it. And so the vast majority of your team is like off doing other things that you're not thinking about and doing because you're trying to fix the one of those many parts that is broken in that moment.
How do you, I totally agree. How do you think about creating such great cross-functional relationships with sales, with product, with engineering, to really allow yourself to be kind of plastic across the different functional areas?
Look, the thing everybody listens to this show needs to understand is that humans are incentive-based creatures, right? Incentives and alignment around goals and incentives fix everything. If you have a problem collaborating, it is because you have competing goals or you have competing incentives against those goals. And so job one is to get very clear on those goals and make sure the goals are aligned between whether it be marketing and product, marketing and sales. We talked about attribution. Once you have your SLA, your attribution, all of that set up, it's actually very clear. The incentives are aligned, and then you just come up with a check-in and like communication process around that. Most people fail because they don't set that foundation, and instead they just go and kind of do a bunch of stuff and kind of over-index on the relationship building side, which is really important. But the relationship part can be secondary if you've got the right foundation and infrastructure around goals and accountability.
I totally agree with you there. It was funny when we tweeted last night about your coming on the show. I got a load of DMs from aspiring marketers who want to be CMOs. And there was about 10 of them who said, hey, can you ask the question of what would you advise aspiring marketers who want to become CMOs in order to get that promotion and get that step up into the role of CMO?
Yeah, so if you're... this works for CMO, but I think it works broader than CMO, right? You have to make if you want to be great at something, whether you want to be a CMO, whether you want to be CEO, found a successful company, you have to make a series of counterintuitive trade-offs that you wouldn't think you'd otherwise make. Most people that I know who want to be a CMO but don't get there don't make trade-offs. What I mean by that is like, cool. You know what, Kipp, I really want to be a CMO. Great. Well, what's the next job you're going to take? Well, I've been doing, marketing automation. It's going really well for me. So I'm going to go take a director of marketing automation. They're going to pay me 20% more. It's going to be awesome. I'm like, great, but what if you just go learn a completely different part of marketing and you go make 20% less in the short term, but wow, you get a real breadth of experience, and now you're actually ready to be a CMO. And most people don't make those changes. If you want to be a CMO, you have to figure out how to get a breadth of knowledge, and you have to figure out how to scale your leadership and get things done through others. Most really talented marketers are amazing individual contributors. They have a hard time delegating and scaling through others. And the magic of being a marketing leader is figuring out how to scale through other people.
Is that not hard to get that promotion to CMO, though, if you move between different roles, constantly kind of flatlined? Do you not need to show a spike of excellence? And you won't show the spike of excellence unless you concentrate in some way.
So the question I think we're asking is, oh, cool, if I have one spike of excellence, is that enough to get me to be a CMO? In an average organization, maybe. What I'm advocating for is multiple spikes of excellence, which is like, hey, I've got a spike of excellence in marketing automation, and then I went and did 18 months in product marketing and killed it. This is the progress and success we had. And then I did 18 months in acquisition demand generation marketing. We grew demand 100% year over year. Now, let me talk to you about how I also built the teams that I made to accomplish those things, and how I think about hiring people. And then you're off. That's the ideal candidate. It's a hard thing to do in practice, but that is the person that a founder really wants.
Kipp, I could talk to you all day, which is rather a challenge given the 20-minute guidance that I did set on the show many years ago. Terrible. Product marketing, I lied. Very simple. But I do want to dive into a quick fire round. So Please. I say a short statement, you give me your immediate thoughts. And I'm going to start with one from Kipp. Kipp said specifically, and I want to make sure I get this right, if you were to Kieran said, if you were to teach Kieran one skill that would 10x his career, what would it be?
The emotional side of marketing, brand building. Kieran is a logical person, right? If you are listening to this, what you want to say is, what are the things that I am best at in the world? And how can I get good at the opposite side? Because that's how you get 10x. If you're like, oh, Kieran is methodical, he is logical, he is analytical. If you can combine that with really emotional skills, then you are like a diamond in the world. There are very few people who can combine those things together.
No, that's terrible advice. You want to be so good at the one thing. It's like I'm an emotion-driven investor. So the only thing that matters to me is human psychology, understanding incentive structures, frameworks, human ambition.
I'm going to disagree with you, Harry, because you gave the question was 10x better. There's no way. It's very hard to get 10x better at the thing you are best at. If you asked me how to make the most money, I would say exactly what you said. But if you asked me how to get 10x better at something, you can't get 10x better at something. Kieran can't get 10x better at something he's been doing for the last 20 years.
Will you not only just then be mediocre at something that you were shit at?
No. So we have a couple minutes here. I'll tell you a little bit about me and my approach to this, Harry. I'm a serial obsessive. I love learning things. I believe that anybody can get to like 80, 90% proficiency in something in 3 to 6 months of like learning something. Maybe not necessarily doing something, but learning, perspective, applying that knowledge. And I've done it across all kinds of things that you would, whether it be marketing, whether it be personal hobbies, whatever that may be. And how you do that is you have to approach learning very differently. Most people go and they buy the most popular books and they listen to the most popular podcasts and all of that. That's a bullshit way to do it. How you actually go and do this is you find who are the people that the majority of the world think are smart at this topic. Great. I've got that outlined. Who are the people that those people learn from? And I go straight to them. And there's normally like these background, less popular, less personality people that have all the fucking knowledge in the whole world. And you go straight to them and you are unabashed. And you say, hey, I will pay you for an hour of your time. I will pay you for a day of your time. I don't care. I am trying to be the best in the world at this thing. Can you help me? And you flatter them, you pander them, you do whatever it takes. And you go and you learn as much as humanly possible. And you go through this deep immersion process where you get all this information and then you start pattern matching that information against the thing you're trying to learn about. Like I learned about art the last year. I learned all about contemporary art. I talked to gallerists all over the world. It was amazing. It was incredible. And I probably have looked at, 10,000 paintings in the llast year because I wanted to understand the lessons that they taught me and how to apply them. And so now, like, I can tell you, like, all the things you need to know about contemporary art. I can tell you the core artist, but I can tell you why. And the why is what's important. Once you understand the why, then you're not just like mediocre, you're actually approaching being one of the better people in the world at it.
I love that strategy. Or you could host a podcast and interview VCs.
That's a good look. As somebody who is the host of the Marketing Against the Grain podcast with Kieran, we do the same thing. A podcast is a great hack to do that.
Phenomenal. Tell me, what marketing tactics have not changed over the last 5 years?
So here, I'm going to give everybody a cheat sheet. The more open a tactic, meaning less regulated by one company. So like email hasn't changed a lot because SMTP is inherently an open protocol. Apple has put some tracking changes in, but like email is evolved, but it's still email. And it hasn't actually changed that much. I know some of the email people will disagree, but I'm sorry, folks, it hasn't changed that much. Whereas if there's one company, like organic search, for example, organic search has changed a ton because Google has changed the search engine results page a ton, more ads, different types of search results. And that really, normally when there's one company that has financial incentives to evolve a platform, that changes a lot. When it's an open protocol, it changes a lot less.
What tactics have died a death, do you think?
I think in marketing, everything is circular, Like, I don't think anything dies. I think it goes dormant for a long time and then comes back around. I think like, look, I think even some traditional advertising channels like out of home and those things, like I'm an investor in a company called OneScreen that's creating a platform for out of home and attribution for out of home. And like, that's going to be awesome. And I thought out of home had died a death a long, long time ago, But so I've learned my lesson that things don't die. They go dormant for a while and then they come back around.
If there was one reason inbound has been so successful, what would you place that success to be on?
A simple, valuable, clear story.
Which is educate first.
The inbound marketing story was 10 very simple slides. The way you were doing marketing doesn't work anymore because technology changed. And because technology changed, people are ignoring you. You need to do something new. That was the story. And we can go, I could give you the 3-hour version, or I can give you the 3-minute version of that story, or the 3-second version of that story. And that is what makes something powerful and successful.
Where would you say you most need to improve as a CMO today, Kipp?
Oh gosh, every way. Problems of scale, international markets are really hard. Leading a large-scale team of people and helping them succeed in a hybrid work environment when nobody knows what the hell's going on. And, some people want to be in an office, some people want to be remote. There's a lot of things to get better at over the next few years.
This is a grenade.
Please.
Do you want to be a CEO, Kipp?
Someday, yeah.
Yeah. I can feel that. You're very, very good. I've interviewed many CMOs and you're like way up here.
Very kind. Thank you.
Final one. What one company marketing strategy have you been most impressed by over the last couple of years?
Cash App.
Why?
I love anybody who's great at marketing a commodity, and money is the ultimate commodity. They've done such a great job of reaching a younger demographic in a, platform-centric way, whether it be through TikTok, whether it be through in-person activations. They've taken a product that had no business of being successful, candidly, and making it very successful through remarkable marketing.
Kipp, this has been such a joy. You can tell that I've completely freewheeled, but you were fantastic,
Love it.
and thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Harry. Appreciate it.